Welcome to your third lesson in web design. In this tutorial, we are going to build a fan page. The theme that I've chosen for this walkthrough is the Cleveland Cavaliers. However, feel free to adapt it to your own theme if you want to. The process of building this web page is going to be divided into three main parts. In part one, we will build the HTML. We will create two main sections on the page. The top section will serve as our menu bar, and beneath the menu bar, we will have a main content area. Within that main content area, I will demonstrate how to construct tables. In part two, we will focus on the CSS, and I will introduce to you the box model concept as we begin to add style rules to our web page. In part three, we will focus on the JavaScript and add functionality to all the buttons that we are going to be placing on our web page. And I'm also going to show you how to create a modal pop-up window. At the conclusion of each part in this video series, I want you to complete the associated video quiz. So let's take a look at how this web page will look by the end of this lesson. This web page is going to feature three tables, all of which will be centered in the middle of the web page. And if one table is being displayed, the other two are hidden. For instance, here we have the player roster being displayed, and these buttons in the upper left control which table is shown and which tables are hidden. So if I click on the record button up here in the upper left, the player roster disappears and the Cavaliers record over the past 5 seasons is displayed. And likewise, I could click on the Picks button, and that's going to hide their record and show a picture slideshow. And these buttons off to the left and right of the picture will scroll through a series of images in our web page. And finally, I could click on this picture in the middle and zoom in on whatever image that I currently am showing. This is called a modal dialog window. So I'll go ahead and close that. And this is what we're going to build by the end of this tutorial. So let's go ahead and begin by focusing on the HTML. So to begin, let's open up Aptana, and we're going to create a new web project. In the upper left-hand corner, you'll have a file menu. You can click the new, and then you'll see a list of projects that you can select from. You can select a web project and a file. For the rest of this video, I'm going to use the shortcut button, but you can get to these things here under the file menu. So here's the shortcut button right there. I'm going to select web project. It'll take you to the same place that I was just showing. And here's our project template page. We're going to use a default project, click next, and give it a name. Here we're going to call it lesson 3. You can change the save location by unchecking this box. I'm going to leave it the same and click finish. So basically we have an empty project folder. So what we're going to create in part 1 is the HTML file. So I'm going to click this again and click file. And I'm going to give it a name. In this case it's going to be lesson3.html. So that's going to generate a blank HTML file for me. The very first line in an HTML document should be the doc type declaration. So when I put in my angle bracket, it detects that I'm on the first line. I should probably be prompted with doc type. So I'm going to use my autocomplete by just tabbing over. Now I want to show you here that if I were to type this out and just push a space, here's all the different types of doc types I can choose from. So I'm just going to scroll through this list, and what we want to work with is HTML5. So I'm going to select that and push tab to autocomplete. So what that does is it tells the browser use a particular set of rules when somebody navigates to our web page and loads it in. Use the HTML5 rules to load that web page. So it's a super important line to have there. Next, we have the root of our document, and that's going to begin with HTML. All right, so that's the name of this tag. So I just created an opening and closing tag, and we need to have a head section like this, and we need to have a body section like that. All right, so I'm going to clean up the extra space here, and then we'll type in between. But so far we have the basic structure. And the very first line underneath the opening head tag should be your meta tag. And here you're going to specify the character set to be used. So in this case, we're in North America and we are going to use UTF-8. All right, so UTF-8 will go in here, and that's basically all we need here in the meta tag for now. Next, we're going to add a title tag, and we'll call this Lesson 3 as our page title. The next two lines that we put in are going to be links to our CSS. And we haven't created those files yet, so let's go ahead and just make a blank CSS file by clicking here and clicking File. And we'll call it lesson3.css. And I'm just going to click Finish. And we're just going to leave the file blank for now. I'm going to go ahead and close it. And we need one more actually. We're going to create another file called modal.css, and that'll be for our pop-up window. All right, so we'll just close those for now and we'll complete those in part 2. But we can put the links into them right now. Here I'm going to call it link, that's the name of the element. REL is an attribute, so this is a property, and it is going to be style sheet. All right, so REL stands for relationship. So the relationship between this file and the other file that we're linking to is that it's a style sheet. And our next attribute is called type. Type refers to what kind of file is it. And in this case, it's going to be a text file. So I'm going to put text/CSS, and that means it's a text file, but it's to be interpreted by the browser as a CSS style sheet. And finally, we're going to use the href attribute, which specifies where to find it. So in this case, we're going to put href equals, and when I push my double quote, it can see that I have a lesson 3 and a modal CSS file. Here, let's do the lesson 3 first. And this is a self-closing tag, so I'm just going to put /angle bracket. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on the next line. So its relationship is a style sheet, and its type is going to be text interpreted as CSS, and it can be found at modal.css. And again, we'll add the styles that are in those sheets later on, but at least now the link goes to a file. And I'm going to save it at this point. So our head section is complete. We've got our meta tag, we've got a title, and we have 2 links to CSS files. So let's start putting stuff in the body section. In this section, our goal is to divide the page into 2 sections. Let's take a look at an illustration again. We want a menu bar across the top of our page. So we're going to have a section called menu bar. Now, menu bar could have sub-content, such as the buttons themselves and the page title, but the overall section here is going to be called menu bar. And then beneath that will be a section called page content, which is going to contain 3 tables and a header called Go Cavs. So these are the 2 things that we have to divide the page into. How do we do that? Well, there is a tag dedicated to that. So I'm going to go to w3schools.com, and I can click on reference and then HTML tag reference. And I can scroll down to the div tag. So the div tag is right here. It defines a section in a document. And if I look under definition and usage, it'll say the div tag defines a division or section in an HTML document. That's exactly what we want to do. We want to divide the page into these 2 sections. So this is how we do it. Here's an example right there. So let me show you how we're going to do it in our web page. I'm going to type the word div, and then I'm going to give a specific ID to both of these. And I'm going to use a name that makes sense for later on. So I'm just going to call this menu bar. And I'm going to write this in camel case. That means that the first letter is lowercase, and then each subsequent word that we add on, we're going to capitalize the first letter. And then I need an opening and a closing tag. So this will be the section on the page that represents the menu bar. Beneath that, we wanted to have the page content. So I'm going to make another div tag, and I'm just going to call it page content. And notice I'm going to have an uppercase C right there. I'm going to close the opening tag and move the closing tag beneath. All right, so these are now the two sections on our web page, but they don't contain anything at the moment. Within the menu bar, we want the buttons and the page title. So let's go ahead and add our first button. Here we're going to use the element name of button, and each one of these is going to have two attributes for now. And we're going to name each button with an ID. So the ID of our first button is going to be record button, and I'm just going to abbreviate button BTN. Notice I also capitalize the letter B. And following that, we're going to set its type. All right, a button can have one of three types, as I mentioned in the previous video. It could be a plain old button, it could be a reset button, it could be a submit button. In this case, we just want a plain old button. And now we're going to close the opening tag and put some text in this button. In this case, I want it to say record, and now I can move on to the next two buttons. So basically, we want this same setup, so you can actually shortcut this by copying this line 2 more times, and we're going to change the IDs and what it says. So this next one's going to be called slideshow button. Notice how I capitalize the S and the B in slideshow. And here we're going to have it say pics in between the opening and closing tag. And our third button is going to be called roster button. And over here between the opening and closing tag, we'll say roster. Okay, now, and we're going to put a page title beneath that. So we're going to have an H1, and it's going to say fan site. Okay, let's preview our content so far and see how it looks. I'm going to click this preview button in the upper left, and I'm going to actually just slide this to this side of the page. So now we can see it side by side. So we have 3 buttons, and we've got this page title of fan site. All right, let's add to our page content. So I'm going to add an H2. So this is our second heading on the page. And in between the opening and closing tag, I'm going to put go, calves, exclamation point. And I'm going to save it. So now we should see the buttons. We should see our first H1 and our H2 right here. And so far we haven't done anything different. So let me add a little bit of a space here. And next up, I'm going to introduce you to how to create tables in HTML. For this next part of the video, I'm going to explain how a table is put together. And then I'm going to demonstrate how to put together your first table. Following that, I'm going to challenge you to build the second table, which is going to be the player roster, on your own. And that'll help reinforce how a table is put together in HTML. So let's go ahead and explain first using an example like this on how to put together a table. So here I have a basic table where it has 2 rows and 2 columns in it. The top row being the heading and the bottom row being the table data. In HTML, to build that table, I would have to have a table structure like this. Now the red boxes around everything is just to reinforce the containers that each one represents. So let's focus on the outermost container here with the table tag. So I have an opening table tag at the top and a closing table tag at the bottom. Then inside that, the second level of boxes I have are the table rows. So TR stands for table row, and I have a top row and I have a bottom row. So inside those I have either TH tags, that would be the table heading tags, or the TD, which stands for table data. And the result of this structure would create a table just like this. So knowing this pattern that you see here, let's construct the Cavs season record table. So on Schoology, I have the Cavs season record located right here, and I also have the Cavs roster typed in to here that you can use. So let's start off with the Cavs record text file. And I'm going to go ahead and download this. I'm going to go ahead and open it, and I'm going to go ahead and copy this into Aptana. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste that in right here. And now I need an opening and closing table tag. So I'm going to type in the word table here. Aptana will make the closing tag, and I'm going to separate it by a few lines. Next up, I'm going to create the header row. So I'm going to put in a TR tags because this is a table row. And how many columns do I need? Well, this is going to be one column, 2, 3, 4. I need 4 columns. In this case, I want these to be header rows. So TH is table header. And the first one's going to be the season. And the next one is going to be the wins. And the third column will be losses. And the fourth column will represent their percentage. Okay, now the next set of rows are going to be the table data rows. So how many rows am I going to need? I'm going to need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I need 5 rows, but if I create the first one, I can copy the format of the remaining. So basically I need to have a table row. So here's the TR tags to open it up. And then I need to have a TD. And I need another one. And I'm going to leave them blank so that I can copy and paste them. All right, so here's the 4 columns of the TD tags. And I can now just move my content inside of these. Okay, so I'm going to copy this right here, and I need 5 of these. So I've already gotten 1, now I need 4 more. 1, and actually I'm going to move this over to there. That's 2, so now I have 3. Oops. 4. And 5. And I'm going to back that one up a little bit. All right, so now I'm going to move my data to where it goes. For instance, that's the 2010 and 2011 season. And I'm going to click and drag the 19 into that column and the 63 into this column and their winning percentage into the final column. And I'm just going to repeat this basically until I have the whole table filled in. Okay, finally I'm going to delete all of these commas and clean up the extra white space and click Save. All right, so over here you can see the table form in my preview pane. So your next step is to create the next table on your own. You can add some extra lines for space. You can begin with the opening and closing table tags, and then in here you're going to fill in using the Cavs roster text file that I give you here, a table that will have 3 columns. In the first column, it's going to be the jersey number. In the second column, it's going to be the player name. And in the third column, it's going to be the position that they play. So you can just put a number sign here, that'd be the hashtag, the player name as the heading for the middle column, and position could be your third heading. So that is your challenge, and that's going to go right here in your HTML file. So you may want to pause the video or review how we created the first table so that you can create the second table on your own. So at this point in the video, you should have just completed the player roster table. And if you have successfully created that, your site will change in the preview side from this to this. So up top we have the record by season table, and we have the player roster table. Next up, I'm going to show you how we can expand and collapse sections of code to make our page more readable. So here is our menu bar section. This is not going to change. We can collapse this and just get it out of the way for now. We can now also do the same thing with our tables since they take up a lot of space in our page. So I'm going to collapse this table, and I've already collapsed the one that I've challenged you to create. So now I can see the overall structure of my page. For instance, this is the head section, and this is the body section. Here's my menu bar, and here's my page content. Sometimes it helps to collapse your code and see how everything fits together. So next we're going to add a table right here that doesn't display table data or headings. In this case, we're just going to use it for layout. So this is going to be our slideshow table. So for one final time, we're going to use the table element, and we need an opening and a closing table tag. I'm going to separate it by a little bit of space here. And this table is only going to have one row. So I'm just going to enter in a TR tag, and it's going to have 3 columns in it. So that's, for this case, we're going to use the TD. We could also put TH, but I'm going to use TD. So I'm going to copy this 2 more times. And now this table contains 3 columns, but there's nothing in these columns at this point. Let me show you what we're making. What we're making up to this point is this little table here that you see in blue. The left column is this left-facing arrow button, and the right column is the right-facing arrow, and in the middle we've got the picture. So that's what we're going to put inside each column. Now, normally speaking, you would create a layout object with pure CSS. That would be ideal, but you can also use tables to do this as well. So that's what I want to show you here. And one of the things that you may want to check out over here under Web Design Tools is this character escape codes. So if I click on this, we covered this in our previous lesson, but all the different characters that we may want to represent that may not necessarily be on your keyboard, or they create problems such as the less than and greater than sign, because these are used for markup, or even quotation marks. All of those symbols are mapped on this, and I put a quick shortcut under Web Design Tools on Schoology. So just click on Character Escape Codes and you'll come to here. The ones that we're going to use in this particular lesson are the left arrow and the right arrow. And here, when I hover over them, you can see the escape codes. All right, let me shrink this down and get back to it. So I'm going to put a little space between each one of these columns, and that's where we're going to put either a button or an image. So here, let's start off by putting a button. I'm going to give it an ID, and in this case, the ID of this one will be left button, and I'm going to abbreviate button BTN. And the type of button that we have here is just a generic button, so I'm going to pick on that one, and then in between the opening and the closing tag here, I'm going to put the escape sequence for that left arrow. So that's going to be an ampersand. That's a Shift 7 on your keyboard. And then it was LARR. It's almost like an abbreviation for left arrow. But as I do that, notice how in Aptana you get a pop-up for 2 different kinds of arrows. Now, the difference between these two was actually this is the one that we want. The other option was this. Notice the uppercase A. We don't want that one. We want the lowercase version. So that's exactly what we put right here. All right, now we're also going to put this same format in the third column. So this is the far right column. So I'm going to just change the ID to the right button here. I'm just going to change this lowercase l to an R. And in between, so in the middle column, I'm going to put the image itself, and the ID is going to be pick. Oops. Now we're going to set the source attribute in part 3 using JavaScript. So for right now, I'm going to leave src there, but it's going to be blank. It's going to be two double quotes sitting side by side. And with every image, we have to put an alt. So I'm going to put this as our slideshow picture. That's going to be the alternate text. And then I can just close it. All right, so just to preview what we have, I'm going to go ahead and save this and click the preview button. And here you can see that I've got this table. All these tables are stacked up actually right now because we haven't added any CSS. So here we see the left facing arrow, then we see our alternate text, and then we see a right facing arrow. So that's exactly what we want. So now what we need to do is we need to go back and add some unique identifiers to each of the major portions of this page that we've created so that when we advance into part 2 of this video series, our CSS rules can isolate these main components and create a rule for them. So for instance, I need to add an ID to H2 that says page title. And these names, by the way, are case sensitive. So if I have an uppercase T, like I do here in page title, use an uppercase T. Down here, for our third table, I'm calling that slideshow table, TBL actually, TBL being short for table. I have an uppercase S. So you're going to add the identifier here, page title, for the H2. In our first table, we're going to call that our record table, and that refers to this right here. And then the second table that you created on your own is going to be called the roster table, and that should look like this. And the third table that we just created is the slideshow table. All right, so with those identifiers added, there's just two more things that we're going to add to the bottom, and that's going to be our script tags for our JavaScript. So we're going to create those right above the closing body tag, and that's pretty easy. We're just going to write script, and the type of script that we are creating is going to be text/JavaScript. So just like above when we created our CSS link, this is a text file, but the browser should interpret it as JavaScript. And then I'm going to set the source attribute to a file that we haven't made yet. So let's leave this empty for now and go over here and create a blank text file for lesson3.js and click Finish. Let's leave it blank for now, so we'll just close it. And then I'm also going to create another file called modal.js and click Finish. And we can just close that for now as well. All right, so inside this src, which stands for source attribute, I'm going to say lesson3.js. I'm going to copy this whole tag and just change lesson3 to modal.js. Okay, so these are pointing to two empty files, but we'll add those in part 3. So now that we've built the entire web page, just save it at this point, and before you move on to part 2, you're going to answer the questions in the part 1 video quiz.